Good morning. It's Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. And this is World History Hour, the World History Hour each week, coming to you live on Facebook. And this is program 48. Quite enjoying this history hour, week in, week out, because there's a whole variety here that I cover. And of course, there's always more and more when you're looking at the world history. But I've also included here my trip to the north in July. That was a very interesting one. And I left you last week with the crocodiles, and we're going to continue from there. I was looking at it, that's why I'm a minute late, but doesn't matter. As long as some people come on and keep me company for a little while, at least. The rest of it, of course, is available in the podcasts and live on, well, the live hour is actually on my Facebook page. So I record it each week and I leave it there for you to enjoy. So that's it. There's also Chinese history. I'm getting quite interested in it now. Sort of as you do things, as you go on with this history bit, especially if you're an adult, when you've lived you've lived quite a while and you want to know about the world, because generally when we are younger, we live, even though we are aware of the world, we live in our own bubble. We have families, work commitments, social life, you name it. But, but when you get to a certain age, a third age, especially as things move on, and you find yourself in a particular bubble of your own, you might want to go out of there and take on the learning of languages and, of course, looking at various eras in history. But this particular program of mine, series of mine, because it's 48 programs and I don't intend to stop, keep going. So I'll be able to cover more and more of the world and learn as I go along, because I primarily do this for me. And it's very important for me to actually continue so that my interests, is sort of developed and I get better and better at it. So that's where I am at the moment. So today we're going to look at a particular character, a very important leader in Chinese history. His name is Cao Cao, C-I-O, Cao Cao. And we'll read about him. We'll look at, we'll continue looking at the Middle Ages now, his castle and the domain. We're talking about the feudal system and all the lords. The pageantry we see today comes from these times. Also, we said that we were looking at the indigenous areas before the invasion, the way they handled death and, the involvement of people in respecting the people who pass away. And there is a great deal of respect within the indigenous communities for the elders who have done well. And we've had, the uncle this week who passed away, and, a lot of people know him and respect him. I didn't know, I hadn't heard of him until now. Also, then we look at Banjo Patterson and Henry Lawson, two colonial writers, and they are wonderful people. But Australia has also many other writers, and I'm hoping that slowly but surely I will approach them as well. What else is there? And then we'll continue with the crocodile bit there on in the Maracay Creek river, and Maracay Creek, I don't know whether it's a river, looks like a river to me, and I think that's the one. So it's a conservation area, this one here, and it's important for Australia. So that's basically it. That's what's going to happen now in this hour. So let me start. Here we go. The feudal system. In those days, there were no factories and very few shops or large towns. We're talking about those days, which is around 1200 and before. You know, it's sort of around the year 1000, 900, 1000, 1100. That's the time we're talking about here. Most people lived in small villages and they grew or made with their own hands most of the food, clothes and other things they needed. You remember the Neolithic villages? These are Neolithic villages, and we still have them today in many areas, but of course modern life and technology has invaded those areas as well. This way of living was typical of the way of life under the feudal system, which was general in Western Europe before the Normans sailed for England. And so the conqueror naturally established it firmly in his own new kingdom also. So the feudal system suited the people who fought for land and for a county or for a duchy, you know, the small areas, and then they wanted to control it. So these are my boundaries and no one shall come in without my permission. To do so, he sent officers all over the country to make lists of the number of people in each village and even of how many cows, sheep and pigs they owned, because they had to contribute to the infrastructure that these people were actually creating as well. Even though, you know, the castle had to be built and the roads leading to it had to be made. So the people around benefited with trade. And generally trade was in the castle. A little market in there and everyone went in and went out. And, you know, those walls controlled the people who came in or went out, and for security reasons. Now, this is the Domesday Book. All this information and more was written down in a large volume which has become known as the Domesday Book. Domes. The domes of a church, you know, the Domesday Book. It was really the first census to be taken in England. That it acted like a census at the same time. And it has provided historians ever since with much valuable knowledge. But of course, the people at the time, the lords and the noble people at the time, the king, the person who controlled the area and collected the taxes were enforced by the military. So they had guards and soldiers at their fingertips. And of course they paid them, but they had to do exactly what the Lord wanted, otherwise they would lose their jobs. Under the feudal system, the king owned all the land, but since he could not use it all, he divided it into a great many large estates called manors. Some of these he kept for himself, but most he gave to powerful barons or noblemen. The feudal system, lord and vassal. In return for their lands, the fiefs, the great barons, who were usually dukes or earls, promised loyalty, fealty to the king, and had to provide him with so many knights and men-at-arms in times of war. So if there was a threat to the state, they had to provide the soldiers and had to feed them as well. In their turn, the great barons also kept some manors for themselves, but gave most of them to a large number of lesser barons or knights. Each of them likewise promised to help with arms and men in his feudal lord. It's a bit like a triangle, like a pyramid. The guy at the top commands, and his command goes down slowly but surely. Man is feudal lord, the great baron from whom he held his manor. Every landowner was said to be the vassal of the Lord to whom he swore fealty. Okay? And that's great. Villains. On each manor was a village inhabited mainly by villains, who did all the work of producing food while their masters did the fighting. The pyramid diagram on this page will give you a rough idea of the way in which men were bound to each other by the feudal system. I'll just show it to you. Here it is. That's the feudal system. The king is at the top. Okay, and you can see we have that, we've seen this with the death of Queen Elizabeth. We can see this, the way in which it has grown. And in England, it's done very well. So these were the dukes, earls, abbots, squires, gentry, and the serfs of the villains. There you are. Archbishops, knights, poorer churchmen. So in other words, there was the pyramid for the lords, the political system locally, and of course the one of the church. And the two are separated. So the people like the archbishop and the knights from, took their orders from the Pope. And that's where troubles began then over time. Here we are. Okay. So that's that. I should show you also the way in which they divided the land. Very interesting. Very interesting. It will still have, of course in England things have changed over time, and the king and his family, the queen and his family, and queen and her family, but the king and his family, in other words, it's still a family affair, being part of this system here. Okay, so there's one family, and until as long as there are heirs, direct heirs, there's no problem, no question, because that's the way the system works. Okay, the villains. On each manor was a village inhabited mainly by villains, who did all the work of producing food while their masters did the fighting. The pyramid diagram on this page will give you a rough idea of the way in which men were bound to each other by the feudal system, and I showed it to you. Civil wars under weak kings. So if a king was weak, wasn't seen to be a strong leader, there was always trouble. Under a strong king like William I, the scheme worked very well. But under a weak king, strong and greedy barons often broke their oaths of loyalty and fought against their lords, and even against the king himself. This happened in England in the 15th century. Well, it's 400 years after what we're talking about now. This happened in England in the 15th century when most of the great barons fought each other for years in the so-called Wars of the Roses. Because such baronial wars caused much loss and suffering, most men in the Middle Ages liked a strong king, even if he was hard and cruel, so long as he could keep his barons in order. And that's what we have today, don't we? The people in government have to keep the CEOs in place because they're very powerful, the CEOs, of the banks, insurance companies. It's very hard to make them follow the rules. So they have to agree to them. But if they decide not to, and then eventually we find out, eventually, but not at the time when the abuses occur. Okay, the next one, the Lord of the Manor. Whether he was a great duke, a knight, or merely a gentleman, the master of an estate was known to his villagers as the Lord of the Manor. On this page, in a sketch plan, which you should study carefully, of a typical manor. I'll show it to you in a minute. His castle and domain. The Earl's castle, or the knight's manor house, was usually built on high land overlooking the village, There was no gunpowder in those days, and from behind the thick stone walls, a surrounding moat of the castle, the Lord could defy his enemies. With him he kept a large or small number of servants or retainers, and a body of soldiers or men-at-arms. Surrounding the castle was the Lord's domain or park. The stream that usually ran through it provided power for the Lord's mill, to which the villagers had to bring their wheat to be ground into flour. You can imagine what happened there. Some of the flour sort of was left behind. A bit of honesty was needed. The forest too belonged to the Lord, and no peasant might hunt in it without his special permission. And if you killed even a rabbit in those without permission, you were deemed to, you had a harsh punishment. However, the villagers were allowed to gather firewood in the forest, and the swineherd could take the village pigs there to forage for acorns. What did I say? I was going to go to Castle and the Domain. Yes, that's it. Next time we'll see what happened to the villains, to the serfs. So it'll be next time. So that's it for today. We've looked at the feudal system from the point of view of the organisation of it, and here is the one that I was talking about. This is, see that? Serfs' huts, field barley, Lord's domain, was separated from the village, the Lord's hunting forest, castle or manor. See that? Serfs' houses just outside, and they could run, if there was trouble, they could run to the castle for security. In serfs' huts, fallow field, and then this one here, the church lands. Again, same as with the manor. And the people themselves had common pastures there. So quite well divided. Okay? So that's it. Well, it's interesting, now we're getting closer to home in terms of history, the one that everyone knows and the one that, the people use to make films and series on Netflix and other platforms. Good. Now, this one here, there's a little note here before I read it. Controlling the emperor and commanding the nobles. We are in China now. This is Cao Cao, and this is the guy I'm talking about. This guy here is Cao Cao. Okay, and then this is some of the buildings of those times. All right. It's always dangerous when I do this because I could touch the wrong button and then I'm gone. All right, Cao Cao. Cao Cao was born in 155 after the birth of Christ and died in 220. So how old was he? 20 plus 45. He was 65 years old. All right. Named himself Mengdi, Mengde, was an outstanding statesman, strategist and man of letters of the late Eastern Han dynasty. He was born in today's Anhui province. He built up a powerful army in the course of suppressing peasant uprisings. As a strategist, Cao Cao found great interest in studying military works and believed that one should act according to changing conditions in wars. Devoted to the theory of military strategy, Cao Cao had some resounding success in warfare. At the Battle of Guandu, he properly analysed the situation between the enemy and his own forces, thus with only 20,000 men. He soundly defeated Yuan Shao's force of 100,000 and strengthened his troops. A strong army needed more food, Between campaigns, Cao Cao made his soldiers cultivate the land to supply themselves with food. This policy of garrison fields not only solved the army's food supply problem, it also improved the economy in the north of China. That's where Peking is. On the political stage, Beijing, I still get Peking in my head, Beijing. On the political stage, Cao Cao saw the rise of powerful landlords in the late Eastern Han dynasty as a threat to the unity of the country. Therefore, he paid much attention to the control of the powerful landlords. He once made the local authorities put some big rods in front of the government office and encouraged them to punish magnates who bullied the weak and gave government posts to anti-landlord elements. This was proved to be effective for strengthening his dominion. In the placement of personnel, Cao Cao held the principle of employing whoever is a talent. He had to be a talent in order to be employed. It didn't matter where he came from. In fact, Cao Cao insisted on promoting any person of talent, no matter what his background was. Therefore, under his domination, a lot of talented people found their positions in the government. Those people contributed a lot to Cao Cao's unity of North China. Because of these advantages, added to the fact that he had the Han Emperor Xiandi under his control, Cao Cao put down all the warlords after the Battle of Guandu in 200 and ended the fissioning condition in North China. No more fighting. This not only was advantageous to the social economy restoration in the Central Plains, also built the foundation for the subsequent Western Jin dynasty as a unified nation. Then famous literateur Zhu Shao appraised Cao Cao as an able official in governing the country and insidious era in the tumultuous times. It was when there was trouble, he was insidious. In other words, he did what he had to do. He didn't look at friendships or anything like that. He just did it. And that's, he couldn't be faithful to what people expected him to do. He did what he had to do in order to win. And that's why he was successful. In traditional drama, Cao Cao continuously appeared as a disloyal image on the stage. Why is that? Because that was true in times of war. Cao Cao once said, in this chaotic time, without me, who knows how many people would want to dominate and claim to be the emperor. So rather than asking other people to do it, he did it himself, but he didn't become an emperor himself. He left the emperor there, but the emperor was without power. I need a drink. Cao Cao also was attached importance to culture. As a multi-talented man, he wrote The Burial Ground, Gazing at the Ocean, short songs, and despite the tortoise's longevity. It's all Cao Cao's works, still available. And that's 2,000 years ago. A bit like the Romans, And many other immortal epics. His two sons, Cao Pi and Cao Zi, were well-known writers as well. So there you are. The wooden image of Cao Cao carved by folks of Gansu province. Here, that's what they look like. There is a wooden, and I showed it to you. That's the mask, Cao Cao's mask. So you want somebody to look like that in a play, there you are. Create a Cao Cao image. Okay, so that's China for you. Now, from China, we go to the America. And, what am I doing here? Dear. I've lost my page, but never mind. I'll be able to find it, I'm sure. Okay. Now this one here, the LGM is the last glacial maximum. That's when the ice was at its highest level, the last one, before it sort of melted and didn't come back to the same levels as before. The last glacial maximum. There have been movements to and fro, because we're talking about the northern part, North America. The question is, who inhabited America before the invasion of Christopher Columbus and the Vikings and the people before that? When did it happen? Let's have a look. Pre-last glacial maximum migration across Beringia into the Americas is strongly supported by the 2021 discovery of human footprints in relict lake sediments near White Sands National Park in New Mexico. There you are. This was last year, 2021. You can look up White Sands National Park in New Mexico, which date human arrival suggested a human presence dating back to the last glacial maximum between 18,000 and 26,000 years ago. Plus, you've got to add a couple of thousand, from the birth of Christ onwards. But it's 18,000, it's more than 20,000. This age is based on a well-constrained stratigraphic record and radiocarbon dating of seeds in the sediments. Pre-last glacial maximum migration across Beringia has also been proposed to explain purported pre-last glacial maximum ages of archaeosites in the Americas, such as Bluefish Caves and Old Crow Flats in the Yukon Territory and Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania. At the Old Crow Flats, mammoth bones have been found that are broken in distinctive ways, indicating human butchery. The radiocarbon dates on this vary between 25,000 and 40,000 years before Christ, before BP says. I'm not sure. I assume it's before Christ. Also, stone microflakes have been found in the areas, indicating tool production. And let's not forget the village, the Neolithic village idea. Previously, the interpretation of butcher marks and the geologic association of bones at the Bluefish Caves and Old Crow Flat sites and the related bonnet plume site have been called into question. People not quite, they didn't quite believe it. Oh, this is not made up, somebody's trying to be smart. But, you never know. You never know. I'm reading, so all these things that we read, who knows how much of truth they have. I'm assuming that they do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. There'd be a lot of research done to produce these papers. In addition to dispute archaeological site support for pre-last glacial maximum human presence has been found in lake sediments and records of northern Alaska. Biomarker and microfossil analysis of sediments from Lake E5 and Burial Lake suggest human presence in eastern Beringia and as early as 34,000 years ago. The analyses are indeed compelling in that they corroborate the inferences made from the Bluefish Cave and Old Crow Flat sites. In 2020, evidence emerged from a new pre-last glacial maximum in north-central Mexico, Chiquihuita Cave, an archaeological site in Zacatecas State, has been dated to 26,000 years before Christ, based on numerous lithic artifacts discovered there. Pre-last glacial maximum human presence in South America rests partly on the chronology of the controversial Pedra Furada rock shelter in Piauí in Brazil. A 2003 study dated evidence for the controlled use of fire to before 40,000 years ago. Additional evidence has been abducted from the morphology of Luxia woman fossil, which was described as Australoid. Now, Australoid people came from Africa. That was the original place where Australoid people came, not Australia, but from Africa. This interpretation was challenged in 2003 review, which concluded the features in question could also have arisen by genetic drift. In November 2018, scientists of the University of Sao Paulo and Harvard University released a study that contradicts the alleged Australo-Melanesian origin of Luxia. Using DNA sequencing, the results showed that Luxia was entirely Amerindian, genetically. Amerindian, American Indian. So the bones of Luxia, the woman Luxia, was, they said, no, this is American Indian skeleton. The ages of the earliest positively identified artifacts at the Meadowcroft site are safely within the post-last glacial maximum period of 13.8 to 18.5 years before the birth of Christ. And what did I say I was going to do? I don't think I can do the whole lot. Let me see. Huh? Well, no, here. I know I've got the whole lot. Okay, let's go on. Stones described as probable tools, hammerstones and anvils, have been found in southern California at the Charuti mastodon site that are associated with a mastodon skeleton, which appeared to have been processed by humans. The mastodon skeleton was dated by thorium-230 uranium radiometric analysis using diffusion absorption decay dating models to 100.7, etc., 1,000 years ago. No human bones were found and the expert reaction was mixed. Claims of tools and bone processing was called not possible by Professor TomPadulaTV. Well, again, these are the fights that the intellectual and the archaeologists are having. The Yana River Rhino Horn site has dated human occupation of eastern Arctic Siberia to 27,000 years before. Years ago. That date has been interpreted by some as evidence that migration into Beringia was imminent, lending credence to occupation of Beringia during the last glacial maximum. However, the Yana RHS date is from the beginning of the cooling period that led into the last glacial maximum, but a compilation of archaeosites dates throughout eastern Siberia suggests that the cooling period caused a retreat of humans southwards. Pre-last glacial maximum lithic evidence in Siberia indicate a settled lifestyle that was based on local resources, while post-last glacial maximum lithic evidence indicate a more migratory lifestyle. So, a couple of theories there. The oldest archaeosites on the Alaskan site of Beringia dates to 12,000 years before to 14,000 Cal years. It is possible that a small founder population had entered Beringia before the time. However, archaeosites that date closer to the last glacial maximum on either the Siberian or the Alaskan side of Beringia are lacking. Biomarker and microfossil analysis of sediments from Lake E5 and Burial Lake in northern Alaska suggest human presence in eastern Beringia as early as 34,000 years ago. These sediments analyses have been suggested to be the only possible recoverable remnants of humans living in Alaska during the last glacial period. Interesting. So that's the evidence. There's quite a bit of evidence that America was indeed occupied thousands of years before Captain Captain Christopher Columbus arrived there. Interesting. Okay, now we go to before the invasion. Okay, before the invasion. What happened to our indigenous people in death and mourning, their practices. One of the things that struck me initially when it first arrived on our TV screens was the fact that, they said that this person here is dead. Don't be offended if we show this person who's died, or you're not allowed to show them. That's one. So second one too, that strikes me too, even today, the fact that the families, the groups, the tribes, they're very close, and that community spirit is still instilled in a lot of the indigenous people of Australia. Of course, we, coming from families, they're no longer extended families, they're nuclear families. We don't quite understand that feeling there, but it's there for them, for a lot of the people from indigenous populations. Now, when someone died, it was a great loss because that person there held also knowledge and power within the group. Okay, so here we go. We go from everywhere. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's go. We'll continue from last week. Everywhere there were great rituals and ceremonies, not only just after the death, but at intervals for a long time afterwards. For example, in Arnhem Land, they could be held for years afterwards. Well, we do that too. Each year we go to the cemeteries at least once a year to remind us of the passing of loved ones. But we think of them all the time, of course. It seems that among the desert people, the most important religious ceremonies were the initiations ceremonies. In Arnhem Land, the most important were the mourning ceremonies, Arnhem Land. And I was just looking at the Litchfield National Park, that's right at the edge of Kakadu National Park. And those are the photos I'm going to be showing today, later on in this particular podcast. In Arnhem Land, the most important were the mourning ceremonies. After a death, there were proper ways of showing grief, and everywhere related to the dead person had to follow the customs. One custom all over Australia was that the dead person's name could not be spoken for many years. In Tasmania, it could never be spoken again. So once you're dead, that's a hard one. You're not supposed to remember. Those who had the same name as the dead person had to get a new one. Even words in the language that were like the name of the dead were no longer used, at least for a few years. The place where the person had died was also avoided by everyone. In the Western Desert, the shelter and most of the belongings of a dead person were burnt, and the women, closely related, ran through the smoke of the fire. Afterwards, the whole camp moved a long way away. My God, unbelievable. Some of these customs were a mixture of grief and fear. People would not speak the dead person's name or go near the place where he or she died because it would renew the feeling of grief. But another person was that these actions might call back the spirit of the dead to haunt the living. A good way of looking at it, I suppose. I think that's... I'm not sure. Oh, yeah. Okay. As soon as a death was announced, all the women of the community wailed in a special way. starting on a low note and rising to a high-pitched note, which was kept up for several seconds. I remember this, from my younger days in Montemuro, in my town in southern Italy. There were people who used to wail when somebody died. This wailing was repeated by those close relatives every evening for some weeks after the death. Moreover, these near relatives showed their grief by injuring themselves. The mother, daughters and wives of a dead man hit their heads with a sharp stone until blood flowed. The father, brothers and sons would gash their thighs. Perhaps they felt that by making their own bodies hurt on the outside, they would feel less hurt in their hearts. Pretty rough. On Bathurst and Melville Islands, members of the family of the dead person could not feed themselves nor do many ordinary tasks. They had to be fed and waited on by others. And again, when somebody dies, generally in families, some people make soup and they bring food to the people close to the dead person. The body was buried straight away without much ceremony because, in hot places especially, it would start to smell. The body was without much, but tall carved and painted grave posts and other mourning objects were made. These took some time. They were very elaborate if the dead person had been an important man or woman. The posts were placed on the grave and there were several days of dancing and singing in which the dead person's life was retold. After this, life returned to normal and the close relatives could carry on their ordinary tasks again. In northeastern Arnhem Land, when a man lay dying, his sacred songs were sung, stories about his spirit ancestors were told to him to help him accept his approaching death. When he died, his body was painted red and his face white. His hair was woven into a belt. Then the corpse was painted with his clan symbols and put out on a platform. Wow. And we'll go on from there next time. Okay? It's halfway to the end of the chapter. So that's that. Now, Banjo Patterson. We're respecting everybody here. The outsiders, the insiders, etc., etc. This is by the Grave Gulf Water, by Banjo Patterson. Far to the northward there lies a land, a wonderful land that the winds blow over, and none may fathom nor understand the charm it holds for the restless rover. A great grey chaos and a land half made, where endless space is and no life stirreth, and the soul of a man will recoil afraid from the sphinx-like visage that nature weareth, but old Dame Nature, though scornful, craves her dole of death and her share of slaughter. Men indeed are the nameless graves, where her victims sleep by the grey Gulf water. Slowly and slowly those grey streams glide, drifting along with a languid motion, lapping the reed beds on either side, wending their way to the northern ocean. Grey are the plains where the emus pass, silent and slow, with their staid demeanour. Over the dead men's graves the grass maybe is waving a trifle greener. Down in the world where men toil and spin, Dame Nature smiles as man's hand has taught her. Only the dead men her smiles can win, in the great lone land by the grey Gulf water. For the strength of men is an insect's strength, in the face of that mighty plain and river, and the life of a man is a moment's length to the life of the stream that will run forever. And so it cometh they take no part, in small world worries each hardy rover rideth abroad and is light of heart, with the plains around and the blue sky over. And up in the heavens the brown lark sings the songs that the strange wild land has taught her. Full of thanksgiving, her sweet song rings, and I wish I were back by the grey Gulf water. Nice one. The grey Gulf water. It's not a very well-known one by Benjamin Patterson, but, you know, I'm doing them all, so slowly but surely. And now we have Banjo Patterson, okay? And we're talking about here the Bush Undertaker. So let's start, okay? The Bush Undertaker. And we continue from last time. Finish life and have a holiday, all right? This speech was accompanied by a gesture evidently intelligible, for the dog retired as though he understood English, and the cooking proceeded. I'll take a pick and shovel with me and root up that old black fella, mused the shepherd, evidently following up a recent train of thought. I reckon it'll do now. I'll put in the spuds. The last sentence referred to the cooking, the first to a black fella, a black fellow's grave about which he was curious. The ships are camping, said the soliloquizer, glancing through the door. So me and 5 Bob will be able to get our dinner in peace. I wish I had just enough fat to make the pen cease. I treat myself to a leather jacket, but it took 3 weeks skimming to get enough for them. They're doughboys. My God. I think this particular story could be offensive to some, but, you know, it was written over 100 years ago, 140 years ago. So one has to understand the context in which these stories are told. And no use, you know, if they're written down, the best thing to do is to read them as they are and then understand how far we've come to avoid certain ways of expressing ourselves in writing. In due time, the dinner was dished up, and the old man seated himself on a block with the lid of a gin case across his knees for a table. Okay. 5 Bob squatted opposite with the liveliest interest and appreciation depicted on his intelligent countenance. That's the dog, okay? 5 Bob. Dinner proceeded very quietly, except when the carver paused to ask the dog how some tasty morsel went with him. And 5 Bob's tail declared that it went very well indeed. Try this, cried the old man, tossing him a large piece of doughboy. A click of 5 Bob's jaws and the dough was gone. Clean into his liver, said the old man with a faint smile. He washed up the tinware in the water the duff had been boiled in, and then, with the assistance of the dog, yarded the sheep. This accomplished, he took a pick, a shovel, and an old sack and started out over the ridge, followed, of course, by his 4-legged mate. After tramping some 3 miles, he reached a spur running out from the main ridge. At the extreme end of this, under some gum trees, was a little mound of earth, barely defined in the grass and indented in the centre, as all blackfellows' graves were. He set to work to dig it up, and sure enough, in about half an hour, he bottomed on a payable dirt. When he had raked up all the bones, he amused himself by putting them together on the grass and by speculating as to whether they had belonged to black or white, male or female. Failing, however, to arrive at any satisfactory conclusion, he dusted them with a great care, put them in the bag, and started for home. And that's it. That's it for this week. next week we'll continue. So, you know, he digs up the grave in order to put his potatoes in. Amazing. Amazing. Let me put my books away now. And that's it. And now we're going to go to my wonderful trip in the north. Here we go. Hold on. Let me, usual thing with the computer here. All right. Let's see. I thought so. That's it. All right, here we go. From last week, we were in Marakai Creek, Marakai Kakadu Animal Land. That's the end part there, not really, you know, up further north. It's further south. Here's the crocodile. Okay, so let's have a look. Got it. That's where we were last week. Okay. Next one. Up. And this croc again going away. He got his feed. I'm here. Coming close to me. And there are people there taking pictures, of course. This is the group. We're getting to the end now. We get off. Let's see.
Back in the early days before we went shooting. Back in the 60s through to the mid-70s, they shot every crocodile they could find.
Have you ever seen one croc eating another?
Definitely. Yep, sure have. They're territorial? They are. This big fella, he owns from here onwards for the next half a kilometre. Each female crocodile, once she starts nesting, she'll pick herself a nesting spot, and that's her turf, about 25 metres either side of that nest. And she'll live there for the rest of her life, the next 30 years of her life. Average lifespan for the female crocodile is only about 50 years. So,
that's it. We're getting towards the end. No? More. Oh yes, this is where the birds, there are some birds there coming down. That was the croc last time. There's another one there.
That's a bag, so she doesn't really know what to do with it. And she comes swimming out. Did you see the little one?
These are the birds coming for their feed. Huh? See? He's threw some meat at them. Look at that. I thought I'd taken some video of this, but they're all pictures. So these are the crocodiles, the birds. They're all like their meat. There they are. Here we are.
The locals call them the firebird.
The firebird.
We call them shithawks. Can only say that there's no kids on here. I hope you're old enough to listen to words like that. Yeah, in Padula, Litchfield, the barbecue area's out and about there. You put your sausages and steak on the barbie, leave it unattended, these birds will steal everything. And a lot of people reporting, they go to put their sandwich up to their mouth. Ice creams, a lady on the boat the other day had a tomato, she was just about to bite that until the bird stole it off her. So they've got to be the Northern Territory seagull, I reckon. I used to say they got precision eyesight, but two of them made a head on a couple of years ago. Knocked themselves clean out on top of the water. The rest of it can't be that precision.
Oh, they catch the meat before it hits the water.
They can't get back out of the water. So you should have seen 15 people in the boat get their cameras on, wait for a crocodile to come in.
Oh. There's another crocodile there. This was edited by me. So this nice photo. Wow, that's a good one. Big one, huh? Oh, enough pictures there, but yeah, got it. Like a little pet. And that's about it. It was a lovely guy, the boat rider, boatman. Now we go off. There you are, one of my, there is. I thought I'll take a picture of us. Thank you very much, sir. And this outside of the place there. It's whack whack in Darwin. Of course, this outside of the place. And from here, we go to Litchfield. That's the bus driver. I thought, thank you very much for this. Now, this Litchfield National Park. We had lunch there first, sandwich, and then off we go. very well organised, travelling with a bus. That's it. And these are the waterfalls. Beautiful, huh? Beautiful place. Fantastic. My sister there. Some friends. That's a better view of the waterfall. They are beautiful. Some people swimming in it. We didn't have time rushing. These things you need time. Wongi Loop walk. There were fish in there. That's why. Let me try to get. Can't see the fish. All right, doesn't matter. Hanging around. Bats. From here, you may see some flying foxes hanging out. As you imagine, hanging makes giving birth a bit tricky. A pup's head pops out first, etc., etc. There they are. See? Plunge pool. There's the plunge pool there. Beautiful. Say something here. Well, from the deck here, it's beautiful. A waterfall. And we've only got an hour. I can't really, I want to go and collect my feet. I'll go in, but anyway, might have to let it go this time. But I'm determined. We'll see. Hanging around. That's from nice one. Oh, there's a photo opportunity, yeah? Selfies. Yeah, with Giuseppe. Let's see. Giuseppe, 2 ore. 2 ore per vedere qua, eh? C'è una bellezza, veramente, vedi che bello. Non aspettavo questa montagna, questa terra. Vedi, l'Australia come bella, eh? C'è voluto un po' di tempo. Ti sta bene qua in Australia? Sì, adesso ti aspettano anche in Italia eventualmente. Ciao, ciao. Ciao. Mina and Giuseppe and Angela, they were interested in taking pictures. There you are, good one, this one. And a group of young people there. And Mina was helping them out with a photo. This is now Florence. This Litchfield still, oh no, we're still there. I did go in. No, it's enough close here. Yeah, but I need the sound. That's it. And then you've got the finger back there, yes? Yes. I'll cut. Going on a swim, Jason, but I'm here in the water. It's nice and cool. Next time we come together, I'll go in. For now, shut. There's something to my son. Angela, 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 Angela. Caution, of course, you've got to be careful. Water safety is important. Back. Then we've got past the place here. We've got a drink. Florence Falls. It's another one of those places where there are waterfalls. Shady Creek Walk. So, a spiritual place. This is beautiful, really beautiful place. But we didn't have enough time. That's the falls, Florence Falls. You couldn't go close. You could go close, but we didn't, just from view. Beautiful. Florence Falls, except we're not falling in, but there are some people swimming there. Can you see them? No, we can't. Don't worry, but we've seen Florence Falls. Oh, there they are. Right up there. It's capturing it. Right, that's it. Look at that. That's a bit of information. Monsoon forest, woodland, cypress, etc. Florence Falls. Firenze. Beautiful. Love Australia's vegetation. Look at that. Amazing. Here we are. Termite. So we're going to stop here, and next time we'll go to the termite. We'll start from here next time. Okay. So basically that's it for today. All right. Well, I come to the end of this other hour, history hour, world history program number 48. It's been quite an interesting one for me. I don't know whether I'm still on. I hope I'm on. And farewell. Until next time, from Tom Padula of TomPadulaTV on YouTube, and of course Insegna Booksellers. And now this one here, we finish, and it'll be recorded in my page on Tom Padula on Facebook, etc. Until next time, once again, ciao, ciao.